All right. Let's see how this is going to go. So this is my very first. Oh, I should turn this off, I guess. Okay. So hello, welcome to Maple Leaf Reviews. This is my first interactive vlog that I'm going to try. Hopefully it's going to work out well. Hopefully you guys can see me all right, can hear me all right. Low volume. 1 second. All right, hopefully that sounds a little bit better. This will definitely be a test for sure. Just let me know if that made it sound any better. Excellent. So like I said, this is my first interactive vlog that I'm going to be doing. Hopefully I'll do more of these throughout the year. With my schedule, I work 10 and 10, so maybe every 3 weeks, roughly, I'll do one of these. And, you know, I'll kind of talk about things that I would have talked about on the podcast. I can answer questions that people might have, as well as just talking about games in general. So, for those of you who don't know, I put out an update video a few days ago, talking about how Jacob has left the channel. It's just me doing this now. I mean, one of the things I found the hardest, even when it was just me and Jacob involved in the channel, was making solo videos. I found it way harder to talk to a camera just by myself versus with having someone else there. So I think the biggest challenge with Jacob being gone, obviously just doing everything myself, is going to be just creating solo content. Now, we kind of been looking at the channel a lot more since we got back from Origins. We went there in June, and it was kind of really an eye-opener for me because it was the first convention that I went to where I kind of went as somebody from Maple Leaf Reviews instead of just Jeffrey, instead of just by myself just looking at buying games. And I didn't realize how introverted I was until I was going around and talking to other people about the channel, especially when I talked about the channel, because I mentioned in a podcast before that even though I've been doing this for close to 2 years now, I still don't really feel like I'm a media content creator for Maple Leaf Reviews. So especially talking to people about Maple Leaf Reviews as a channel, I was very introverted. Now, it was pretty awesome that a few people actually came up to us and they recognized us and they were telling us how much they liked the content that we made. Now, talking to people in that respect, I really enjoyed that part of it. Talking about what do they like about the videos that we were creating, our unique take on before and after, our initial expectations and then first impressions of a game, or just talking about games in general, but talking about just, you know, being a media content creator. I didn't like that as much. So when I came back, we were kind of both in this boat of, well, what do we want to do with Maple Leaf Reviews? How do we want to continue with it? Jacob had the new job, so his schedule was conflicting more with mine. My daughter is now older. She doesn't sleep as much during the day, so a lot of my time was being eaten up taking care of her while I was home. So we just didn't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to the channel, and we were both kind of coming back just with questions about what we wanted to do. After several months, I decided that, yes, I'd still like to do something with the channel, whereas Jacob, with his schedule and everything, it was just too hard for him, and he decided to leave. The other thing that I found when I was doing this little bit of soul searching after Origins was I found that I was playing a lot of games that I didn't necessarily want to play. I was just playing them because I felt like, oh, I'm making videos, I should be playing more games, I should be trying to make more content, and I feel like that kind of drive to just putting out more content for the sake of putting out more content and playing games that I wasn't really interested in for the sake of doing that just kind of wore on me after a while. So this last few months I've just been playing the games that I want to get to the table. And the other thing was, once I reviewed a game before, I felt like, okay, I've reviewed it, it's not helping the channel if I play it anymore, so I kind of almost felt a little bit guilty playing some really good games again after I had reviewed it, and again, that just wore on me after a while. So coming back now into Maple Leaf reviews, a couple things that I'm going to be doing differently is I'm just going to really play the games that I want to play and then talk about the games that I've enjoyed or really love playing. That means I'm going to be putting out less video content, but if that keeps me more interested in doing it, then I think that'll be better for both me and for the people who watch. I mean, I don't really like watching people bash games all the time. I like hearing people talk about games that they find they're super passionate about. So hopefully there'll be more of that for me going forward. What else? So the other thing, I found my tastes have drifted way more towards the heavier spectrum. And I think Jacob partially wasn't going with that trend with me. So we weren't finding that the games that we wanted to play with each other were a lot less mingling of the two. So actually getting together and wanting to both play the same sort of game wasn't happening that often. So recently I've been playing like a lot of Food Chain Magnate. I got to try Indonesia. I've played that twice so far. Really, really enjoying that game. Yesterday I got to play 1846, my first 18xx game. I put up a before and after for that. I think I'd like to talk a little bit more about that one right now. I think with that game, it's really just a framework for what you can do in a game. They give you a rule set, but it's so much up to the players in how they play it. So when you are inexperienced with the game, you could kind of have a lackluster experience with it because you don't know all the things that you could potentially do. But I want to get it back to the table some more so I can potentially try and explore those things some more. Like, I mean, the more, I mentioned heavier and heavier games, but I've also liked games more and more economic. Like I mentioned Food Chain, that's about trying to make money. Indonesia, trying to have the most money. Also, I got Arkwright back to the table a few more times. So, and again, that's all about making money. So 1846, it's about making money in that game as well. So I want to try more interesting ways to try and make the money in that game and see what there is to explore. Because I found with some of the games that I were playing before, like the lighter stuff, I felt like it was just too linear. You choose one or two strategies, you follow it to the end, and then there's not really a whole lot of coloring outside the lines that you can do. This action can only do this thing, or that action can only do that thing. So I want something where I can kind of push the boundaries. I actually just played Food Chain Magnate this morning, and it was a very close game, $25 difference between first and second player. And the person who came second, they tried a waitress strategy. They just went and got a lot of management slots. They've got all the waitresses, so they were just making like $60 a turn just from having waitresses. So it was something that was unique that I hadn't seen done before, but the fact that the rule set of the game allows you to try those sorts of things, I'm constantly searching for more and more games like that. I mentioned I played Arkwright a few more times. There were some things that I've been doing in that game as well where it's kind of like, how far outside the box can I think? So I started up, in that game you have a bunch of factories, you're hiring workers. The amount of workers that you hire kind of determine the demand for the different types of goods that are being produced. So, and it also, how many workers are employed determines how much you have to pay per worker in your factory. So the last game I played of that what I wanted to do was just start a bunch of factories, hire the maximum number of workers that I can. So I drive up the wages for them, and then I just close down the factory, so then my opponent was left having to pay higher than normal wages and really cutting into their profits. So doing things like that was really interesting for me. I'm just going to check and see, is my live chat loading? So what else have I been doing in the interim? I got Kingdom Death Monster, the Kickstarter. I mentioned that on the podcast a lot and how excited I was to get that game to the table. The very first game that I played, so I've been waiting months to get this game. The miniatures come, you have to assemble them, so I spent one afternoon putting them together. They weren't as difficult to put together as what I thought they were going to be, which was good, and I actually quite enjoyed assembling them as well. So got them put together, read through the rules, got it all set up, had people come over, a 4-player game, and then the very first action that I took in the game, I died. I attacked the white lion, it had a reaction and just killed me, and it was kind of like months of this anticipation, hours of putting it together, of reading the rules, getting ready, and then the very first action, my character just dies. And I think that is, it was a good lesson, number one, in just how brutal that game could be. I mean, you can just die so easily in that game. The other thing is that you shouldn't really get too attached, I think, to any one character, because they're likely going to die, and you're likely going to have to lose a few campaigns. I've started another campaign and went to about Lantern Year 7 or 8, I think, and then we got killed by the Kingsman, so everyone is just dead now. But I'm still excited to start another campaign, see what I would do differently, and probably still die again, because that's just Kingdom Death. The thing about that game, and you might say, well, I've been talking about these heavy economic games where it's all strategy, you're trying different things, it's very low luck based. Why would I like something like a Kingdom Death? And normally I would say, yeah, that kind of amount of luck in a game isn't really the thing that I like the most. But I think as long as I don't get too attached to any one character, seeing them die doesn't hurt as much. But the kind of balancing act with Kingdom Death is you have so much of the game where you really have no choice on what happens. You're going to encounter this event, you roll on a table, and you could simply just die. That's it. There's no opportunity for you to do anything different. So it has this huge swath of the game where it's very almost story driven. You just see what is going to happen. But then it also has this other part of the game, especially in the settlement phase, where you're choosing what gear you're going to make, what settlement locations you're going to build, what innovations you're going to be able to choose. And those decisions are so meaningful. They have such a huge impact on how the game is going to progress and what sort of abilities you're going to have. So it has this balancing act of extremely meaningful decisions and no decisions whatsoever where it's just a roll of the die. I wouldn't say the combat is my favorite part of the game. I think my favorite part is the whole story element. I mean, one hunt we went out, you always go out with 4 survivors. We survived, we came back, we were relatively unscathed. But then on the way back, you have settlement events. One person got swallowed up by a gaping maw in the ground, and then one person murdered another one, and then we executed the murder. So I lost 3 people just coming back to the settlement, and there was nothing I could do about that outcome. So it has that balancing act, and I think the story of just those crazy things that can happen really what draw me into it. The other thing is that I can play through a Lantern Year with me and my wife in about an hour or so, maybe even 45 minutes, depending on how it goes. So the games can be quick. You have this no decision really making it for some of the things. The combat can also be interesting in how you're going to manipulate. There's abilities that allow you to look at the card so you can adjust what the monster is potentially going to do, or what you're going to know what it's going to do, so you can try and manipulate your placement of things. But then you could just have your plans just go down the toilet and you're just going to die. So overall, I'm going to say I've enjoyed playing Kingdom Death. I don't think I would want to always have to restart. Like, if I keep playing the game and keep losing at Lantern Year like 8 or 9 to this one character, I think restarting and doing everything over and over again, I think that would wear on me. Maybe my excitement is so high because everything was new. All the story events that happened were so new, so it was kind of like the sense of, well, what's going to happen next? That might be what has made me like it a lot more. So once I play through it another time, we'll see if that still level of excitement to see what's around the corner and is going to happen next is still going to be there. Just want to check to make sure that everything is still working. It is. I love the mind stream. Yeah, I know. That's, like I mentioned earlier, the thing that about recording solo is that you never get a chance to just pause and let someone else talk. Like when me and Jacob would record, he would go for about 30 seconds, a minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then that would allow me to compose my thoughts for a little bit, and then I can come back in and talk for a minute, and then I get another break. So definitely going solo, I kind of just have to stream a bunch of stuff together. I never really get a chance to compose myself for the next thing that I'm going to say. Oh, and that, my camera has shut off. So this is, like I said, this is my first time doing this. This is definitely going to be learning for the video setup. I mean, how I have it set up is not the greatest. I really would like to get my computer closer so I could use my computer to see the chat, because I really just have my phone in front of me. So it's going to be, how do I want to have this set up so it makes it the easiest. The other thing that I found when I was trying to set this up was the mic was picking up the sound in the entire house really well. My house is really open, so in one end you could just hear everything else. So if you do hear a baby crying or something, that's just my my daughter. So what else has been going on here? Let's see. Does anyone have any questions? First, let's see. Because now I'm just being quiet, and being quiet on camera is never a good idea. I did get to play a game recently that I wanted to talk about. Dominant Species. Now, it's been a long time since I've played the game, and I've held off on playing it because it's such a cutthroat game. Like in some games I've mentioned before, I like building stuff up. Like when I play Through the Ages with my wife, we don't usually go the military route. We kind of just like to build the best civilization that we can and see how well we do compared to others. But Dominant Species, the game is all about player interaction, and it's all about usually negative player interaction. But I was at work, I explained the theme to some people, and they really liked the theme, so they wanted to try it. So I played it 4-player. It was everyone but my first time playing it. And it went over really well. I think it was going in and explaining that how cutthroat it was going to be helped prepare people to not get too attached to any one area of the board, especially like some of the catastrophe cards, which just like kill everything on a tile, or the blight removes all of the resources that you can survive on. So that was definitely good, explaining that beforehand, because if you don't explain that and it kind of just catches people off guard, I think they can be a little put off from the game. But the thing that I wanted to mention about the game is it's touted as, I think, a very heavy game. And I've talked about in the podcast before, we had the whole segment on gateway games, how I don't really think that you can classify one group of games as gateway and just say it needs to meet this criteria to be considered a gateway game. I think any game can be a gateway. It just depends on the person and their interest. So I mentioned that I had talked about the theme to some people at work, and that interested them. So I used that kind of Dominant Species as a gateway game for them to see these kind of heavier style games. The same thing with Indonesia, with Food Chain Magnate. I mean, I have people in my game group who've played less than 25 different, what you would call hobby style designer board games, and these are the games that I'm introducing them to. They're not flashy. I mean, in the case of the Splotter games, they basically look like just they're hand drawn on the board. And Dominant Species isn't even that pretty. It's just bland colors out there. So it's not like they're being drawn in by what it looks like, but still the theme appealed to them. And I was able to use those heavier games that people would consider like not even mid-tier or later tier, but like the last tier that you can introduce them to style games. And I used those as gateways. So I really think that if you do have people that you want to introduce heavier games to, I think you should just go ahead and try it out, especially if you feel comfortable with the rule set yourself. You never know what's going to appeal to people, and every time I've introduced them to people, they've really enjoyed those heavier style of games. Yeah, I definitely think the for Dominant Species, someone had mentioned how, I don't think the rules are that heavy. I think it's the pre-planning that needs to go into each round, because you're going to play out all your action pawns first before you resolve them. So especially that first turn, people don't have a sense of how things are going to play out until they see it a couple times, and how impactful some of those decisions that are made early can be in the round. So I think that's probably where it's the most difficult to teach people, not necessarily in the mechanisms of the game, but in how impactful some of the things that they do can be. So when I was teaching them, I was pointing out, if you do this could be the potential implication, or if you do that, or if someone glaciates here first, well then all those cubes that you had on that tile are now going to be gone, and you're not going to be able to migrate them. Or you might be trying to attack someone on that specific tile, but then you're going to have to split up your Tundra attack between maybe one or two tiles. So yeah, I don't think it's the planning that has to go into it is the hardest. Will I be doing a before or after or review of Nusfjord? I do have it pre-ordered. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Essen this year. I used up all my vacation when my daughter was born, so I didn't have any time off to go over this year. I have it pre-ordered, so when it gets here, I will definitely be doing either before and after, or a review, or I will probably likely do both for that game. Anything that Uwe puts out, I'm definitely going to pick up. I know a lot of people didn't like A Feast for Odin from last year, but I mean, I love that game. I love how many different actions there are. I mean, it's just outrageous how many there are, but I like having that much diversity, and as you play, you can try and beat your score from game to game. So it's not really me trying to beat the other players at the table. It's me trying to push myself to do better and better every single game, and usually I push myself a little bit too far and I end up doing worse. I found the same thing with Terra Mystica when I first started. Usually when me and my wife play a game for the first time, we'll do pretty well, and then the next game that we play, we try to push ourselves to the limits of what a strategy could possibly take. So usually we do really well the first game, but then the second game we do quite not so well, because we're exploring the edges of what's possible within the game and just seeing what will happen. There are only 2 actions, Jeff. Oh, I see Jacob has joined us. Yes, there are only 2 actions. You either gain tiles and then you just place them out on the board. But it's how many different types of tiles you can take. How do you want to upgrade them? I think there's a lot of options in that game. And again, like I said, it's about pushing yourself to try and do better and better. rather than just trying to beat the other person. And which, like I said about the games that I mentioned before, like Indonesia and Food Chain Magnate, especially Indonesia, it's such a different style of game because it's not about beating your score from last game. It's all about just beating the other players around the board and trying to be more cutthroat and take the companies that they want to control, or merging different companies and take them away, or giving them to other people, or taking control of a shipping company that stretches across the board so people have to pay a lot to deliver the goods around. So I think it's interesting how the game group that you have can kind of dictate the types of games that you want to play. So when I played primarily with my wife, it was more of those building up style games and trying to beat your old score. So like I mentioned, Through the Ages, we're just trying to build up and beat our score from before. Terra Mystica, we were doing the same thing. But I've started playing with more people from work. I've been playing with David from Connect More. And they like these more economic style, more player interaction style games. So I've been able to get Dominant Species to the table, been able to play games like Indonesia, Food Chain Magnate, Arkwright. So as my game group changes, my taste in what I like kind of changes with it. And I think that's mostly because I enjoy it when other people are enjoying a game. If I'm playing a game with someone and they're not really digging a certain aspect of a game, well, then I kind of shy away from games that have that aspect and games that I play with them in the future. But if I play with someone and they really dig a particular type of aspect of that game, then I kind of find games that maybe highlight that a little bit more and trying to bring those to the table. So I think that also goes to highlight that I think I'm really more of an Omni style gamer. So that's why I can play something like Kingdom Death. I can play games that don't have a huge lot of player interaction like Terra Mystica. Or I can play games that are all about player interaction like Indonesia. I really think the thing that is kind of limiting for me in what my tastes are, I'm not really drawn to games that kind of play themselves out, where I can't really make any what I feel like meaningful decisions. So lighter style games. Dinosaur Island or Dino Genetics. Also, why did it take so long for Jurassic Park to be a game? I don't know. Like, you would think that managing, there's a lot of games about managing different types of either factories or business units and stuff like that. And Jurassic Park being so huge, why did it take so long for someone to make a game about running a dinosaur park? I mean, it's a theme that I think would appeal to a lot of people. My wife also plays this computer game called Prisoner Architect, and I tried to think of a game that's about running a prison. I couldn't think of anything, but that's another theme I think could potentially do well. I mean, the video game has done really well. It's super involved. You have to manage their happiness or else they're going to riot. You have to do their laundry. You have to get their meals provided for them. You have to do shakedowns to get the contraband away. I mean, there's so many aspects to that game and the management that I think that you could translate some of it over to a board game and make a very interesting board game out of it. The other thing, I was mentioning the different people that I play with and the different tastes. My wife hates games where the goal of the game is simply to just make money. She doesn't find that interesting. But then, as I was talking about Prisoner Architect once to her, the goal of the game is really to just make a prison that makes you a lot of money, so you can continue to expand it to make more money. So I thought it was interesting how her taste in video games of trying to make money that way didn't necessarily translate over to board games in the same way. And I'm going to have to say this is probably the hardest recording. I mean, normally when I record a video, I'll try and do like 3 minutes at a time, 5 minutes. And then usually I talk for 5 minutes and then that didn't go well, so I'll restart. So having to talk for this long just by myself has definitely been pretty challenging. Also, I'll probably run this for, if I can find things to talk about, for at least another half hour, and I think in the future I'll try and keep them to about an hour. That seems a good length of time. The other thing, maybe in the future I can have some people on to just help me carry the conversations about these things as well. How many people do we have watching? 6? Not bad. That is 5 more than I thought I would have. Considering that I am one of those 6 people. So what else do we have to talk about? Oh, another game that I started playing recently was a Kickstarter that I did, was Clans of Caledonia. We have talked about this one on the podcast as well. Jacob did it in the Kickstarter segment, and how it has a lot of similar elements to Terra Mystica, where you have this player board and you're going to be putting out pieces onto the main map, and then that kind of unlocks production for you. I've played the game 4 times now. The first few times I thought the game was okay, but it wasn't really hooking me. I felt like I said before, I felt like the game was too linear, especially some of the clans. Like there was a clan that you get $8 when you produce milk, and you could just sell it. So what do you do for that strategy? You just make milk and sell that milk. There was another one where it was you get extra money for making whiskey. So what's the strategy for that? You just make whiskey. You're just trying to maximize those abilities. The most recent time that I played it, I played a clan that gave you started with extra merchants, and you were able to sell and buy from the market for cheaper. And I felt like that it didn't direct me down one path as strongly as I felt some of the other clans did. And I really enjoyed that play a lot more. I felt like I had more freedom to try what I wanted to do. I mean, it is a similar game into Terra Mystica in some respects, but I feel like it's really quite different, especially with the market. So people who have excess of goods, they could sell it to the market, and then that drives down the price because there's more supply out there. And you could buy from the market if you're not producing something, and then you use those goods to kind of complete contracts. And the interesting about how the contracts works is there's 3 different types of goods. I believe it's sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton. And they're going to be worth 3, 4, or 5 points at the end of the game. But the resource that has been completed the most is going to be worth the least number of points. So it's not like you can see, okay, this one's worth a lot, I'm going to try and get more of that resource. But then usually when you do that, you make it worth less, because then there's more of that available. So that interesting thing of, I want to get more points, but me getting more of this one resource actually makes that worth less. So it's an interesting balancing act. The other thing about taking these contract tiles that I thought was interesting was, at the beginning of the game, you can, when you take one, you get $5. But you can only ever have one unless you have a clan that allows you to have 2. So you want to complete them early, because in that first round you get $5 for taking them. That's free money. The next round is going to be $0. You don't get anything, but then you're going to have to pay 5, then 10, then 15 coins to take them in the last round. So that balancing act of trying to spending money to try and set up your infrastructure versus spending money to try and get goods to complete contracts early. I like the decision of how much do I invest into the future turns versus how much do I invest into getting the points now. I like that. So especially like Arkwright I mentioned before, as you play the game, your share price is going to keep going up. So it's going to be more and more expensive for you to buy shares in your own company. And at the end of the game, it's simply just how many shares you have of your company multiplied by how much that is worth. So when you get a bunch of money at the beginning of the game, it's how much do I want to reinvest into this company to make it grow even more. But the more I reinvest, the faster the company is going to grow in share value, which means the more expensive it is going to buy shares later on. So that tightrope that you have to walk of how much do I reinvest versus how much do I just try and get points now is always interesting to me. I'll have a few more comments. Many apologies for my ignorance, Jeffrey, but are you a Twilight Imperium fan? How about a review of Twilight Imperium 4? I am a Twilight Imperium fan. I think it's probably one of my wife's favorite games. The problem with that game is the length of time that it takes to play. But now that I've been playing, I've been getting people used to playing more and more games that take 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours. I think I might be able to get that to the table because it's kind of a day event that you need to plan. I've played the game quite a bit before. I had a dedicated group of 4 of us. It was almost everyone's favorite game at the time. So we would just leave it set up at the table, and we would just play game after game. And if they needed to go home and come back the next day, well, then we could just leave it set up on the table and play it that way. I was interested in getting Twilight Imperium 4. I mean, it's number one, it's really expensive, which the cost of a game doesn't necessarily deter me too much, but as long as I think I'm going to get the plays out of it. And since I haven't been playing Twilight Imperium 3 really in 4 years, it was, paying 160 Canadian for something that I might not get to the table or might only get to the table once every couple of years. It was just a tough decision to make. So I don't have that one ordered yet, but I do enjoy the game. I like the building up the tech tree. I usually get too involved with trying to attack other people that I usually always lose or come last because I don't like going for points in some games. I mentioned this before. I like where a game rewards you for doing stuff that you want to do rather than you have to reward yourself by just going for victory points. Apologies again, but my group has started a play of Game of Thrones, the board game, like crazy. Are you a fan of that type of game? I enjoy that. Oh, here we go. I think the camera that I have has a 20-minute timer, and it just shuts off after every 20 minutes. So I'll have to try and figure out something for that in the future. So Game of Thrones, the board game. I do enjoy playing that. I like the whole hidden information when you're deploying all your tokens. Again, that one was one that it's very cutthroat. I mean, you can really mess over other people in the game. And like I said, up until recently, I haven't had a group where they've enjoyed those sort of aspects of a game. So it's one that I have still in my collection because I do enjoy it. And it's one that I want to try and bring out in the near future because I think that members of my group will really like that. Plus the theme with Game of Thrones being as big as what it is now, I think could really draw some more people in. But the other thing about that game too is I think you want more players involved because it's not so good with just having 3. The more people involved, the better the game is going to be. The other thing that I had mentioned before in the podcast is how the game group that I used to have, we didn't really do really well with negotiation. And the game is all about negotiating your support for different battles and things like that. So when you don't have a group that's fully invested in negotiating, you kind of lose an aspect of that game. But it is something I think could potentially work really well with my group going forward. So if I do try that one in a future interactive vlog, I can talk about that. Yeah, someone mentioned if I ever come to Edmonton, we'll play TI4. I would love to give that a try. I think it's, from what I've seen of TI4, I think it streamlines some of the game and makes it a little less fiddly. I think especially the whole research, how it gets gained, it's based on how many colors of different text that you have. It allows you to build the tree up versus specific ones leading into other specific ones. What is everyone's most played game of 2017? Scythe. This person's game is Scythe Julio. Close to 20 plays. My most played game of this year, I can look it up really quick, is Arkham Horror, the card game. This was one that Jacob actually mentioned to me on the podcast. And if anyone who's listened or watched before know that I'm not the biggest fan of co-op games. But this one I picked up. I played through the initial campaign twice. And I've been keeping up with the game ever since. I'm currently up to 25 plays. I'm just waiting on getting more of the Mythos packs. I'm trying to put my finger on exactly why I keep coming back to this game. I think it has that deck building aspect, but it's kind of pieced out to you over time. So I can play with my wife. I mean, she doesn't like building decks like for 3 hours before we play a game, but you play this game and then you get a couple experience points so you can change out a couple cards after the game. And I think piecing that out slowly over time helps her want to play it more. Plus the scenarios being very different from each other really helps. There's a little bit of a story to it, and it's challenging without being devastating. But usually, I mean, the last campaign, the Dunwich Legacy that we played, we died at the end of it, but it kind of, at least we got to play through the whole campaign. It wasn't like we died after the scenario and had to play the same scenario over and over again. Old games. Are you a fan? My group loves an old space game called Throne World, an old school game from my youth that you might enjoy and may be able to get to the table more often than TI3. The thing about old games is I didn't really get into board gaming until 2012, and with the hobby being so leaning towards cult of the new, a lot of those old games get dismissed or not talked about as often, and really the games that I find out about is really through hearing about other people talk about them, whether they be YouTubers or podcasters. So if someone hasn't talked about it, it might be hard to for me to know about the game. But I'll definitely look up Throne World, because I'm not opposed to older style games. Like I mentioned, I played 1846 yesterday. That's a game from 2005, which I guess, I mean, it's only 12 years old for a game, but I don't always need to be playing the newest thing. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I felt like with the channel, I felt like I was forcing myself to play the newest stuff just because I felt like I should be, and how that kind of just wore on me after a while. So yeah, I wouldn't mind going back and I just want to play good games, and I want to talk about good games instead of talking about things that don't get me excited or passionate about it. Let's see. My second most, I'll talk about my most played games for this year, because I think number 2 will be pretty interesting. So Arkham Horror, the card game, was my number 1. Ice Cool is my number 2, and this kind of, given the games that I've been talking about so far in this video, you wouldn't necessarily think that I would enjoy Ice Cool, but I don't know. There's just something about that game and missing shots and how frustrating it can be makes me want to keep trying to make more shots so I can get some that works. And it also goes into the game group that I have. One person really loves the game, so again, it's kind of the game group dictating the kind of games that I play. I think the other thing about that is, because my game group has been doing that maybe more and more often, I've been getting more and more selective in the games that I keep in my collection. Because if they see a game on my shelf, they might suggest to play it, and if I'm not really feeling like playing that game, then I keep having to say, no, I don't really want to play that one, don't really want to play that one. So over the last few months as well, I've really cut down my collection to games that I'm more interested in playing, because when my game group is over and they're like, oh, let's just play this game that is on your shelf. Terra Mystica, when we were still doing the podcast a little bit while ago, I talked about the app had just came out. I had been playing the heck out of that game on the app, doing ranked games as well as playing against people pass and play. So currently for that game, I'm up to 17 plays with people either pass or play or in the physical copy, and I think for ranked games I'm up to probably close to 20, 24 games for that as well. And the interesting thing about app games, and this is something that I haven't been able to figure out what I want to do yet, because I like recording statistics for the games that I play, who won, how long it takes to play, well, how many games I've played of something. So number one, with a game where you're playing a ranked game, I mean, it could take up to like 4 weeks for the game to finish, because people are allowed up to 3 days between turns, so it can take a long time. So I haven't been recording those ones, and I don't know, do I just record games that I play in person with my friends, or do I record all the games? There was another app game that came out that I played a lot of, Onirim. It's just a solitaire game, and I played that one over 100 times, to the point where I was just like, okay, I think I've played this game enough now. It basically, with Onirim, you're just trying to get rid of, you have these doors and you need to get keys to unlock these doors to get out of this kind of dream world. It's just a simple card game that you can play. But I basically got to the point where I was as good as I was ever going to be at the game, and winning or losing basically came down to the luck of the draw. I mean, I'd have an equal number option of going one color or the other. I would choose one, and then the card for the other color would come out. And I couldn't win any more than 2/3 of the time. So it was kind of just, I had got as good as I could, and it just came down to luck after that. And then once it got to that point, I wasn't interested in playing the game anymore. But something like that, playing 100 games on the app for that, I didn't record them in my statistics, but I haven't decided how I want to do that with regards to app games. I mean, it's not like the hugest deal in the world either, how I record games or not. Someone has said, has your new interest in 18xx given you a desire to try 1830 Ultimate Cutthroat Railroad game on the planet? Well, I am interested in 18xx. Even after that game of 1846, I thought the game was just okay, but I felt like it was okay because of how we played it, not necessarily the game itself. And I think the game could just get better the more and more experience you get with the game. So I'm definitely more interested in 18xx games and more of them. The problem is that nobody in my game group, well, number one, usually most of the people in the game group, I'm the one introducing them to games. They're not doing it the other way around. And I don't really know of anyone who is big into 18xx. So there being so many out there, knowing which ones to pick up, knowing, number one, where they're available from or how much they cost, or the differences between them, it's going to be hard to pick the next one. I think I kind of want to stay with 1846 for now. Try and play that one to get really comfortable with the system, and then see if there's certain aspects of the game that I like more and some that maybe I like less, and find an 18xx style game that highlights the ones that I like the most and kind of streamlines the ones that I'm not a huge fan of. My group has started to play an old Martin Wallace Civ game called Tempest. Are you a Civilization game fan? Any favorites? Well, my favorite video game is Civilization 5. I love building civilizations. It's the same thing that kind of translated for me over to board games, is starting off with basically nothing and building up from there and seeing everything that you've accomplished in the game. I mean, even games like Indonesia, where you start off with $100 and you build up to thousands of dollars. Even something like that, where you start off with little and you build up to a lot. I did just buy the new Civilization game from Fantasy Flight, A New Dawn. I had played the previous one that they had put out. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I mean, it's been years since I've played the game. But I can't really remember what it was, but I did own it and I did trade it away. So that, I'm looking forward to the new one coming out. Hopefully it'll be something I enjoy. I mentioned Through the Ages. That's in my top 10 games of all time. I played, what's the one? Clash of Cultures as well. That's another civilization building game. The problem with Clash of Cultures that I found was there's a lot of technologies that you can acquire, but I felt like a lot of them were almost meaningless because they either gave you free technologies of another type, so it looked like you had a lot more options than you actually did. Other civilization style games, I mean, Nations is another one that is compared a lot to Through the Ages, and I know some people like it a lot more than Through the Ages versus a lot of people like Through the Ages more. I'd be willing to try that one, but I'm not interested enough to pick it up myself. But a civilization game that actually has a map involved, I haven't found one yet that I can think of at the top of my head that I've really enjoyed. I mean, you can make the argument that Twilight Imperium is almost like a civilization building game. You're kind of expanding to new continents. You're building up a tech tree, gaining resources. So that one might be considered a civilization game. But I don't know if it fits all the tropes enough to be considered that. I think I'm all caught up on comments. So yeah, I think, wow, it's been 50 minutes already. So yeah, I think this was a good first experiment into doing the interactive log. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I think a couple things that I would do differently the next time, I think I'd be a little bit more prepared to have more topics to kind of have a list that I can go through if I kind of run dry of something that I'm talking about. Similar to what I did with the podcast, I kind of just went maybe a little bit too freeform for this. I like I mentioned when I went to Origins, I liked talking when people came up and talked to me about games. That's why I got into doing the podcast and the channel at the beginning, is because having deep and meaningful conversations with people about the games and the sorts of things that games make you think about was why I wanted to do it. I mean, it's the thing I love doing. So I really liked this whole you guys being able to ask questions and me answer them. So I think I will keep doing this. Hopefully there'll be more people, more questions, because I really enjoyed that. And I mean, really thank all of you for joining me for this first run and bearing with me through it. Hopefully I did a good enough job to keep you guys interested. So if there is no other questions, I think I will call it there. Again, thanks for joining me. Hopefully you'll stick with Meeple Leaf Reviews. I know it's definitely going to be different just having me and not having Jacob. Who knows if Jacob is still in the chat? Maybe he'll join me for a couple videos in the future when his time allows. But yeah, thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you'll enjoy the stuff that I put out in the future. And yeah, if you ever have any questions or just want to chat, just hit me up, and we'll see you guys next time.